Welcome to CX Excellence Chats with Anjali, the podcast that's all about transforming your business through the power of customer experience. I'm your host, a growth and customer strategy consultant with a passion for discovering human and brand relationships. All businesses desire growth in revenue and profitability. The only way to achieve these objectives is through actively acquiring and retaining customers for the long haul. And that needs imparting superior experiences across their life cycle. In each episode of this podcast, we dive into a critical component of CX strategy that can potentially make a huge difference in your business evolution, but one that is always powered with a customer lens. The theme for today's podcast is product design and CX. The product is the tangible and the most valuable connect the consumer has with any brand. Actually, it's the very reason for the relationship to exist. All else comes later. It's at the very crux of the brand customer relationship. Let me quote from the guru of product design, simplicity, and innovation, who literally disrupted and changed forever the way we interact with the universe through our mobile devices. Yes, I'm talking about Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple. He had a firm belief that it is our job to figure out what the customers are going to want before they do, to actually read things that are yet to appear on the page. His driving insight was actually deeper than customer is always right, because he actually said that customers don't know what they want, and it is our job to help them figure out what they want or actually uncover what they would require and what would truly benefit them. Interesting approach, one that he used very, very effectively, but which we will explore more today as we get into this conversation. Suffice to say, product design and CX are clearly joined at the core. To explore this today, who we have is somebody who calls himself a fractional chief product officer and who helps design products that customers will love. And he deploys an innovation based on a customer first approach to this process. So without further ado, let me introduce him. Welcome, Avijit Dutta. Hi, Avijit.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Anjali, for having
So
me.
let me give a short introduction and then I'll ask you to talk about yourself. So Avijit is the founder and chief designer at Nonlinear, where he works with startups and entrepreneurs to help solve interesting consumer problems by creating innovative design solutions. He holds 15 years overall experience, and though he started with very different and unrelated fields of risk, strategy, and operations roles, yet I think somewhere along the line, he fell in love with product design and then he built Nonlinear 7 years back. So, Avijit, why don't you start off by telling us about yourself and how you stumbled upon product design and made that your passion and career?
Sure. First of all, thanks, Anjali, for having me on this show. A little bit of correction. It's been 22 years now, not 15.
Pardon my
20 plus years. But anyways, yes, product design. I've got into product design for about a decade now. The first part of my career was more into strategy and risk and stuff like that. And in the year 2015, when I left my corporate job, my last job was with Jabong.com. Back then, it was a fashion e-commerce platform, right? I thought that, okay, this is time for me to become an entrepreneur. And I tried to build my own product, the first product. You won't believe me, I failed terribly. Not because my product idea was not good, not because there was not a market, but I knew nothing about how to build a product. And even though my fancy background and education would want me to believe that I know something about product innovation, the truth was glaring at my face that I don't know anything about how to build a product. Okay. And that kind of got me grounded to the basics. The next 2 years, I completely devoted myself into figuring out the secrets of building great products. And thanks to my background, I got invited to a lot of places, and a lot of startup founders, especially early stage founders, they thought that I know a thing or two about about innovation, I never said no to them. So I kind of walked pro bono, worked across segments and sectors uh, to understand, what it means to innovate a new product. Okay, and during that time, it would be, I guess, about 80 to 100 startups that I might have interacted with, and that was my immersion into the world of building products. And then fast forward 20 years, like another 15 years, now I'm here. I am running Nonlinear, which is a product design studio. We focus on building products from first principles. And why design? I mean, I would rather say over the years, from more like a CPO to a CSO, I have demoted, so to speak, to a product designer role, and I'm extremely proud of that. There's a reason why I say so, because earlier we will be thinking with our minds, right? So as an MBA from a fancy school, or anybody who's just like working at the strategic layer, they would kind of think that, okay, innovation happens here. But then I realized that no, it's about thinking with your hands. Okay, if you can't think, if you can't translate what you are thinking into through tactile senses into the real world, that is where innovation or great ideas actually slip and fall into the ditch where nobody cares to look, right? So that's where I will stop. Now, if you ask me that, okay, uh, why do you think that design is at the center of innovation? I would rather say the entire philosophy of building Nonlinear was founded on this facet that people actually do not know how to build a product. It's the same thing that when you said that customers do not know what they want. My customers are founders, okay, people who have got ideas for solving problems, right? And I realize that they do not know how to build a product. They might be excellent at coding, they might be excellent at selling, but they do not know how to build a product. And that's where I kind of came in. And also, I did not know as a founder right back then. And that's how Nonlinear was founded.
Wonderful. I love the phrase thinking with your hands, and this whole tactile piece says something about your philosophy and the path you follow. And says non-linear, so that's in a sense saying something about what you do.
Thinking with hands is a borrowed term. I'm
Okay.
not the
Okay.
first person to use it. In the West, there's a company called IDEO. I'm sure you know about
Yeah. We
it, right?
all, yes.
Yeah. So the founder of IDEO probably started this phrase "thinking with hands" and kind of stuck with my core since the time I read about it. So I use it on a daily basis. Yeah.
Sure. I think there are things that inspire us and kind of help us lead into our own purpose and path. And I think maybe that
True.
was the connection for you. So very basic and fundamental, quintessential question: does the
Mhm.
chicken come first or the egg? So what I'm trying to say is, do I like fried chicken or do I like KFC? You
Mhm.
know, in the startup world, I have seen enough founders saying, "ये मेरा brand है." अब फिगर आउट करते हैं कि प्रोडक्ट में क्या होना चाहिए,
Mhm.
and then they're tinkering and changing and so on and so forth. But consumers buy brands or do they buy products? What comes first, and what is it in reality that's being followed today?
Sure. So I would say probably do not blame me if you find it diplomatic, but I'm not trying to be diplomatic. I'm kind of
Mhm.
absolutely cutthroat about this issue. Uh, the answer is it depends. It depends on the context. Now, when you say that product first or brand first, let us understand these two words first, right? So, what is a product? A product is something that solves a problem for a particular kind of user in a particular context. Let's say if you want to go to office, you are at home, you don't have your car, you have to book a cab, so you use Uber or Ola, right? In that context, that product solves your problem of finding a transport, right? But then what does a brand do? The brand builds a trust. It minimizes the chances of having a bad ride, so to speak, right? So if you let's say step out of your house and you can also get hold of a cab which is just running by, a yellow taxi or something, right? You can hop on, but you do not know whether you'll get a desired experience, right? It can be pricing, it can be behavior, it can be route, it can be the AC, it can be anything, right? Now, what does a brand do? A brand increases your reliability on the service quality, period. And for that, you pay a premium willingly. So if you ask me what, should a brand come first or a product come first, I would still say it depends. Because if you're not in a hurry, and let's say your Uber, your phone has died, let's say, the context is your phone died. How can you find a cab on, like, you can't use Uber, right? You have to rely on the guy on the street. So in that context, brand does not matter. But if you have the your phone charged, probably you will use Uber, right? The context also includes the potential impact that experience will mean to you. For example, let's say if you want to go and have some fun with pani puri, you want to have some pani puri in the evening, you want to go out with your friends, chit chat, have pani puri. Your local kirana guy is fantastic for that, no problem, right? No problem at all. He has been serving you for 20 years now. But imagine if that is would you approach it the same way if it is about your daughter's education? Let's say which school or which college or which course your daughter should go. That's a very high stake decision, right? If the decision is high stake, we tend to go for a brand, because if you send your daughter to an IIT or an IIM, you know that it's probably highly likely that she would be good, right? But then if it is a trivial thing where your failure tolerance is extremely high, if the pani puri goes wrong, that's not a problem, fine, you'll skip that guy next time. So it all depends on the context, right? And our failure, what do you call, a tolerance for failure at that point.
Agreed. I mean, as a consumer, I would say if I'm not even in the market for a particular product, no matter how good a brand you are, it'll not make any difference to me, right? I'm not even in the market for a consumption of that product, right? So from that standpoint, I feel that probably the product comes first. But you're right. If I'm already in the market, then yes, choosing a brand becomes very important for me. And then depending upon the relationship or what special the brand is doing, there may be a series of preferences that play out in the mind. But my question was more with regard to the process that the startups are following. Are they building the product first or the brand first?
Should I give you straight?
Yeah, absolutely.
They have no clue. Most of the early stage companies, they don't have any clue. You know what? Because you have to empathize with the founders and the founding team, right? So they probably are inexperienced in all facets of business. Building a business requires at least 9 different facets, right? It's not just about just the product or just the market or just the technology, right? It is a combination of at least 9 different facets which actually makes a business. Now, if you build a great product but you don't have a business model which is backing it up, nobody is going to, you're not going to be hurt, right? So I would say that let us show some empathy to these young founders. They really don't have much clue, most of them. I'm not saying everybody, most of them, they don't have.
No, I think all of them start off very nice with a very, pointed sometimes problem that they're trying to solve. And then they realize there are a bunch of other people that are doing that. And they get caught in this whole web of how do I differentiate? And then starts this whole train to say, what is it that I will do differently for my customer? Are there unmet needs or underserved needs or emerging needs or something different which can help me do some pivot where I become unique in some manner? So what's your view? Are people really laboring that hard to find those gaps?
So I would say the intent is there, right? So so I've been extremely lucky to have worked with and spoken to, mentored at least 150 founders, if not more, in the last 10 years. What I understand is they have all the right intent. But of course, please also understand they do not have the adequate background in terms of building a business. They might be a great coder or a great
Sure.
sales guy, right?
Sure.
But they do not have exposure to the variety of like the all 9 or 10 facets of building a business, and therefore they lose out. So maybe one block among the 9 is green, maybe 5 of them are green, but then one block which is in red, and they have no clue how to even understand why it is going wrong there. Yeah. So I would say that that is where they struggle. But if you ask me, if there is a method to this, is there a method to this madness? It looks like madness. Like it's like as a founder, I want my user to go from point A to point B, you know, whatever is state A to state B, and but there's no defined path there, right? So it's extremely kind of hodgepodge. It's extremely fuzzy. But then my job is to find out that most efficient route for this guy from state to state A to state B. In abstraction, I'm talking. Right?
Sure.
Now, if you ask me, is there a method to that? Of course, there is.
Yeah, sure.
There is a method to this madness. And then let's take the example of, let's say, what do you call a 4W framework in design thinking, which is more about what is your current state, what if, which is the possibilities. You open up the possibilities. What if I don't do it this way, but that way? What if I don't do it at all? Let's say, for example, I'll give you an example. Let's say, if you say that if you have to transport somebody from point A to point B, let's say from city A to city B, the best way we knew before was a horse ride. Then we got, let's say, a motor car. Then we got a rail track, right? Then we got a airplane, right? So people say, okay, you can fly. Why do you have to, follow the ground? People said, somebody came and said, you can fly. You can take the sky. You don't have to worry about the jungles and the rivers below, right? But then somebody came in and said, oh, wait a minute. Why do you even have to travel? Why not Zoom? Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely.
Why not use Zoom, or a teleconferencing, or what we are doing right now, right? So if you just have to communicate, you don't have to physically travel. So that's kind of, what is possible. What if, right? So what is the current state? What if we can look at it with a different lens, and then you can ask that, okay, there are 50 or 15 or 5 different possibilities, but then within that, what is it that wows people, the users? Okay, Zoom. You don't even have to ride a car or a train or take a flight. You can just log into a Zoom room and you can have a conversation. So that wows people, right? It saves money, it saves time, it gives you almost everything. If you do not have a physical need of a physical contact, then Zoom is the best way to go. So that is what wows. And then you see that, okay, does it work? When you say does it work, it is not just about technically whether it is works, but it also means that whether it works commercially. Is there a feasibility? Is there a viability? Is there a usability? All these angles come together, and then you have a fantastic innovation.
So, you said you work with 150 different founders or more, and you've gone through so many times, the same process of finding solutions and creating designs. And in the startup world, we say there are 2 kinds of solutions. You either have vitamins or you have painkillers, right? But so where do you see in your experience with so many founders, is there higher traction with customers with either of these 2 types?
Hands down, with painkillers. Okay. But you know what? I say this, like, you get people for the wrong reason and keep them for the right ones. I'll repeat this. You get people's attention for the wrong reason, but then you keep them for the right ones. So it means, let's say, if you go and tell somebody who's, let's say, in their 20s and probably binging on KFC and nothing against the brands, but all this fried food, and then gaining weight and complaining that they are gaining weight, and they don't have a boyfriend or a girlfriend because they're fat. I'm sorry, I'm using very crude words, but I'm just saying that If you tell them that, look, your lifestyle is screwed, why don't you change your lifestyle? Why don't you hit the gym? You change your sleeping pattern, change your food habits, and you'll be healthy, and you'll see how the world changes in front of you. They would not listen. They would not listen. You have to tell them that even though you want them to do that, you have to tell them something that they want to hear. You can say, okay, be date ready in 8 weeks. And you have a queue in front of your business, right? You tell them that you be date ready. So you talk about the impact, and maybe that's the wrong reason for them to be fit, right? I'm just saying with our gray hairs. But then you get them in for the wrong reason. You switch them, or maybe you keep them for the right ones. They will start realizing that, look, health is paramount. I mean, forget date, no date, doesn't matter. I need to be healthy. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. I mean, clearly that's also marketing parlance to find the right triggers for the consumer as to, what is going to get them excited about it. But the product has already been created. So then you find the reasons, as you say, retrofitting in some sense. So let's look at this a little bit more to say, when you're building a product, you're not building it for just a consumer type. I mean, most brands will tell you that they have a certain specified target audience, a decision maker, a certain persona, and so on. But having said that, it isn't very homogeneous, right? Because in every type of product category, you'd have varied kind of users. That's one. And the second thing is also the fact that the user profiles are shifting as more generations are coming in. And, as the millennials and the Gen Zs are entering most product categories as decision makers and buyers, the way they approach the whole decision process is very distinct from the way the earlier generations, for instance, their parents did or the earlier ones did. So how do you account for that in your design process to say that, we're actually designing to appeal to, the new audience or a multiplicity of audiences?
Okay, so I think there's a lot in that question. So let me unpack this first.
Sure.
What you're trying to say is that when we think about building a new product, how much of time and effort do we spend on understanding who we are building it for? Is that the right frame?
Yeah. So first is who we are building it for. Second is we know that that's a shifting lot. That's also not a static lot. So that's the question.
The need and the consumer profile shifts over time. So the way I approach design, I have, again, I think somewhere when we were talking outside this, I mean, you mentioned you were asking about my design philosophy, right? So I have a very clear two-step design philosophy. I feel that I call it's the edges which defines the middle. It's the edges which defines the middle. A little counterintuitive, right? So let's say when something becomes trendy, something becomes the standard or the norm, long before that was a norm, it would appear on the edges, right? And it would be unnoticed, right? It will not be noticed by the mainstream. And then in fact, in innovation, we have a framework called mainstreams and what do you call extremes. Okay. Sometimes the extremes define what the mainstream will follow. Okay. So that is where I'm saying the edges define the middle. So if you think about the bell curve of adaptation, right? The edges are either the early adopters or the late laggards, right? I'm talking about the early adopters here, the edges. Like they are on the edges. They're very few and far between. But then there is this middle where the large chunk of users and business is there, right? So before it becomes a mainstream, it will always be an extreme. Extreme, by extreme, I mean it will be on the edges. So edges defining the middle. So if that is the philosophy, then how do I spot like what would become a trend, so to speak? Why should it become a trend? My assumption, the approach that we follow at Nonlinear is that we believe that the consumer may or may not know what they want. We may or may not care about what they want. Okay, it's rather an exploratory journey that we need to take with a first assumption that should come from the founder or the founding team itself. You should have what do you call an hypothesis, right? A zero hypothesis. Like you
Yep.
start with a hypothesis that, okay, this kind of people needs this, and this kind of people may not know that they need this. Am I making sense to you? And then
It is, because it's exactly what we started with, right? It's the Steve Jobs example, right?
exactly
They may not know.
exactly. So therefore, to answer your question, whether we assume that they know and then we try to fit it, no, it's not like that. It's the other way around. You have to have an intuitive understanding of your market you want to cater to. You have to have some assumptions, and those assumptions can be wrong. That's perfectly okay. The very nature of iteration, which is embedded in innovation, allows you to correct or course correct as you go, as you move forward. So
Sure.
therefore, it's absolutely okay if you actually started with a wrong note. You
Got
understand?
it. You will
But
get
if
to it eventually
you'll get to it
in the
eventually.
iterative. Wonderful. I
Yes,
like that. But I like the fact that you're saying you start from the fringes, which is the polar opposites or
yeah,
the early adopters, and then move to the mass later, because that's really the S curve of adoption. That essentially, so you're
exactly,
trying to catch them young.
exactly.
Interesting. Interesting. So tell me, I mean, since we are talking about audiences and customer sets, I also want to understand, are you a believer of consumer research, and what is the role of empathy in design? So I'm sure you have your take on that.
Yeah, sure. So, okay, let me put it this way: consumer research is more like uh, rear view driving. Okay, so let me explain. So let's say when you drive your car, you are in your driving seat. Okay, you have a very large front uh, window, right, where you are allowed to see the, let's say, next 10 meters, 20 meters very clearly, right? And then it is hazy. You don't know what is there, and you are driving, right? And there is also a mirror here in the middle, two mirrors on the sides, three mirrors, which does not contribute to seeing the future which is coming to you, like what is ahead of you. It tells you what you have been through, the
Yeah,
back, right?
yeah.
That is why it is called rear view, right? And it also gives you very interestingly a caveat that objects in the in the mirror would be nearer than you think they are, right? So that means it's distorted. So the view in the mirror, the rear view mirror, is distorted, but it also tells you what you have been through, the past. Consumer research is also like looking at the rear view mirror. Now, if I take this analogy to the next step and see that how much of importance or significance does a rear view mirror have on your driving experience? It has. Whenever, but if you keep looking at the rear view mirror and then keep driving, what would happen?
You
You
bang
will
into.
bang into something. You'll probably, depends on what kind of situation is that. It can be,
Fatal.
terrible as well. It can be fatal. It can be anything, right? Or it can be
Sure.
funny, whatever it is, right? So my point is, there is a place for the rear view mirror. When you take the turn, when you are overtaking, you're changing lanes, you need to look at it for a brief period of time. It gives you a glimpse into what has been, but it will never, ever tell you what is coming in front of you. So consumer research is a rear view driving. Okay, you should keep that, but use it sporadically. If you're talking about building something 0 to 1, if you're building something which is
Futurist.
absolutely futuristic, then there is a place for consumer research, but take it with a pinch of salt. Do not rely 100% on it, because you have to, most of the time, you have to look forward. And what consumer research gives you is data. Data comes from past can tell you something which has happened in the behind, right?
Yeah.
It can also predict something. You can build forecasting model, these that you can tell you
Yeah.
something about what might happen in the future. Great, do that, but do not only rely on it. That's my submission.
No, I completely agree. Uh, Actually, counterintuitive to that, all of AI, for instance, is built on the same philosophy, right? It is based on past data and extrapolating that into the future. And literally, that artificial intelligence is guiding a whole lot of decisioning today with the assumption that all of those trends will repeat. It has no intelligence of its own, right? And it cannot create from a vacuum. It is only based upon learning from them. It's called machine learning, right? For a reason.
Yeah.
And so, but what you're saying is that when you're doing a product design process, you are bereft of that. And actually, that's where AI fails. Anything that's creative, anything that's into the future that a human mind can do, but that's where computers will fail. They will never be able to
Yet,
live
yeah,
up to
they're
that.
not yet there. But I would say that I mean, it does not mean that we don't use AI. We have to, right? It speeds up a lot of stuff for us. But then, I am extremely hopeful for those people who are original thinkers, right? So, AI will disrupt, of course, the job market. A lot of so-called, data processing, these that kind of analysis kind of jobs will go, right? And therefore, governments across the world, they are thinking about an alternate minimum, what do you call, minimum income scheme or something like that. Let's say, for example, in Europe, there are a few countries who have already deployed that, right? So some kind of a minimum income that every citizen will get, because AI will displace jobs. But
Yeah, but
then
that's
at
most
this,
of the jobs are repetitive in nature and they are doing the same thing over and in and out. And that's where these things can be deployed. But let's look at a role like yours. How do you get a machine to do that?
no, you won't. But at the same time, it will accelerate. So the word is acceleration. So
Sure.
if you say that today, if you ask me, let's say five, not five, let's say 3 years back before Gen AI, okay, the task of, let's say, I am doing some kind of a consumer research, or I'm doing some kind of a, let's say, empathy mapping, I'm doing some kind of a user journey, I'm building scenarios, I'm doing 50 things, okay, it will take maybe 5 months. I can do that in 5 days today.
Sure.
Okay, I can do that in 5 days, and that too alone, sitting in my nice cozy office. I can afford 3 seats of space to one person because there's an AI. Now, what does it mean? It means that there would be some jobs which will be gone for
Sure.
sure, but
Sure.
probably they're gone for good, in a way. I
Mhm.
mean, I know that it's not apparent, but believe me, it is just like when you shifted from horse to a motor car. When we shifted, right,
Yeah.
as a community, I mean, we got some benefits, right? But then, how many years it took from, for that switch to happen. So there would be resistance, there would be repositioning, and reassessment of our position in the world, right? Where do we belong? But then, of course, it is happening for good. That's my take. And in fact, in the creative industry, uh, as far as my studio and I am concerned, I use AI left, right, center, but I use it extremely, what do you call, prudently, and I know where to stop. I know where it's human intelligence, which is the need, and where I
Right.
can rely on machine
Yeah.
learning.
So coming back to my question, the role of empathy. Can
Okay,
you
yeah,
use it? Yeah.
yeah, of course. I mean, so we practice design thinking. Uh, in fact, I have probably the only game in the whole world on design thinking. It's a card game that I use to facilitate adaptation of design thinking across companies, including the very large companies to small startups, to even in the last 5 years, it has also, I mean, these days, even campuses are extremely interested. So I keep visiting the campuses. So, having said that, empathy is, let me tell you, empathy is hard. We, it's probably a abused, overused word in the innovation world, because everybody says that, but I dare. How many of them actually practice? How many of them actually can practice empathy? Because if you have to practice empathy, you have to change as a person yourself. Okay, and it's extremely hard, extremely hard. Uh, so, uh, if you ask me, do you think that empathy is being practiced across the world? Yes. Do you think that empathy is core everywhere? No, because it is hard to practice empathy.
Yeah, but
But
is
can
it
you?
critical for your
It
process?
is critical. extremely critical for exercising empathy. And then, by that, we should also understand that by empathy we do not mean, of course, not sympathy, but then it's not about oh my god, look at this poor person. No, that's not empathy. Empathy is absolutely objective. It's absolutely measurable. It's driven by an objective, which is the mandate of the innovation of the product itself. Okay, so it is critical, hands down. It is critical. Yeah.
So in this process, you said you kind of look into the future and then it's iterative and so on, and it develops. How do you ensure that customer experience is automatically built in, and so that every time the consumer interacts, he will come out with a pleasurable, delightful, wow experience?
Okay, so one thing I liked about what you said, how do you ensure customer experience is
built into it,
built into the offers, right? Now that's important. So I call it CX by design. So if you leave your experience by what do you call by somebody who's driving that experience on that particular person, it's a mandate on him, it's his KPIs, whatever it is, it will fail. You have to make sure. So as a designer, we have to make sure that empathy is customer experience is inbuilt into the offerings by design. It means that's the only way to move forward with your offerings. If you do not have that, you cannot progress to the next step. So there's a Japanese philosophy called pokayoke, okay, which is fail safing, right? It's a very old philosophy which has been extremely popular in the automobile sector, right? So it's like, it says that there's only one way to go right. So for example, let's say you think about a plug, okay, and if you have two cylinders, the plug can be put into the hole in two ways, right? This way and that way. But so there are two ways of going right there, right? But then if you apply the principles of pokayoke, what you'll do is you'll make one hole a square, another hole a round. So the square cannot go in the round, so there's only one way. So you're eliminating the other possibility by design.
Got it.
Okay.
Very nice.
So the world is full of this kind of small innovations that you can pick from one place and apply to your area of operation.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. So a little bit more segue into this whole innovative process. There is disruptive innovation, which is like you talked about, Uber or Airbnb, for instance. When they came in, they completely changed the way we interact with that category. And it's never going to be back to the same again because it's changed forever and ever. But this kind of innovation comes once in a blue moon. I mean, when I say blue moon, I mean long time. It doesn't come every day. But companies, brands are necessarily creating what is called incremental innovation almost every day, which has marginal benefits. It could be, for instance, when COVID happened and people digitized, there was innovation that was happening to adapt to, customer behavior. Or it could be, I mean, in product design, let's take the example of in the ready to drink category, Paper Boat, for instance, innovated in their packaging just to make it more convenient, maybe for consumers. Also interesting, maybe. I always wonder what they were inspired by when they did that. But I think what I'm trying to say is that I think for most organizations, it's important to marry to this process of innovation. So that, is there a systemic way to kind of get more breakthrough designs happening where you can do it more accurately, more faster, and therefore remain at the cutting edge, like riding a tiger, right? If you innovate, you have to continue to innovate.
So you know what, you picked up this example and it kind of triggered a thought on me. The best way to ride a tiger is ride it early.
Yeah.
You mean, you see what I'm saying? So before the tiger has become that big, that
monster,
that monster, if you ride him every day, every single day, it will accept you in his life. And even when he has become that monster, you can still write it. Okay.
Sure.
So I mean, let me decode in normal terms. So
Yeah.
it's basically, I'm pretty old school in that thought. Okay.
Hmm.
I mean, I think that old school thought is really, really good, because so for example, let's say if I want to become a good, let's say, cricketer. Okay.
Hmm.
What do? I play cricket every day, isn't it? If I want to become a good writer, what do? I write every day, right? If I Do you think that I have this in a flash, I'll get that brilliance one fine morning, I'll just wake up and become an author or something that would fascinate the whole world? Zero. It never happened in this universe. Okay. Look up read the biographies of the best authors that this world has got. You will know what kind of struggle and what kind of practice they have gone through. Okay.
Yeah.
So you become what you practice, and period.
Yeah.
You become what you practice, and period. I say that with all my force, because and submissions, because believe me, if you want to become a good mother, you practice being a good mother every single time your kid gives you an opportunity. You miss one, you become a laggard. You want to become a good, consistent innovator, as a company, as an organization, you want to kind of keep on pushing out great products in the market. Practice design every single day, practice problem solving every single day, change the way your people work, change the culture, change the acceptance of failure, redefine failure, in your organization, right? So if you don't do that, if you don't practice innovation, you don't innovate, period. So every single day we need to do that consistently, and you don't know which day you'll hit that jackpot. So you better do it every single day. The best way to write a fantastic poetry is write poetry every single day,
Yeah.
and then be in front of people. Don't just write it and be like, let's say, like Van Gogh, right? Amazing paintings and everything, but nobody's discovered it until he was dead, right? Not like that.
Yeah.
That is where this whole idea of writing in public, building in public came in, right? So you now have communities, and thanks to internet, you have communities where you can go and you can talk about your product, and even before you have actually written a single line of code, you can have people who would come voluntarily giving you feedbacks on what might or might not go right. It was unthinkable before, right? So therefore we have more opportunities to practice innovation on a daily basis today than yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think in very simplistic terms, what you're saying is that organizations must build clear practices for design and innovation and
Yes.
inculcate that in their culture. I know, I mean, for instance, in one of my previous organizations, we had this fail fast culture.
Mhm.
And we actually used to promote people to innovate and fail fast, and be very happy to and actually celebrate that, okay, they failed, but good, fail fast, please don't fail long. So but yet it's not very easy to accept, because people still feel like failure is not taken upon very kindly, and therefore they hold themselves back. uh, that was one of the learnings we had at that point in time. But yeah, as you said, I mean, those are of course cultural challenges, but having some sort of systemic process is absolutely pertinent to hitting upon the real great ideas to emerge, right?
Yeah.
Hmm. So, on the same principle, we were kind of, I was reading on Kunal Shah of Cred fame,
Yeah. Yeah.
his philosophy and theory of, it's called the Delta 4 framework for
Yeah.
product design. And he says that he has his own philosophy of what makes for great innovation and customer stickiness. And he had three or four reasons why that would happen.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have a view on
Yeah,
that.
I'm aware. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure, why not? So
Yeah.
I mean, more generally speaking, what Kunal was probably trying to point out, and that's a beautiful framework he has. But you know what? it's the same knowledge. He's just putting it in a very nice way so that people understand it. Okay.
Sure.
So what he says is that if on a scale of, let's say, 0 to 10 of efficiency, if your offerings or your new solution to the old problem, if that is more than 4 in a scale of 0 to 10, then no matter how bad is your offering, people will not go back to the old way of doing things. So basically that's the threshold. Okay.
Sure.
So and then so it actually means that the the value delta, let's say there is an old way of doing things and there's a new way of doing things, and if that value delta is more than 4 out of 10 in terms of, let's say, an arbitrary scale of 10 efficiency gain, so to speak,
Sure.
then people will not go back to the
The
old
old
way
way.
of doing things. And he keeps talking about this Uber example,
Yeah.
where like people, even if Uber does not overcharge you, or there are cancellations and these and that, you still would not go back to the roadside taxi, because the efficiency gain is more, maybe about 7 8, right?
Yeah.
But then if it is let's say about beauty care, would
Hmm.
you go online? No, you would not. So you understand what I'm saying? Or let's say buying a fashion accessories or a shirt or a dress for yourself, you'll still try to experience it online, like
See.
in person, right? So the switch would not be completely online. So this is
Yeah.
the example he keeps on saying, and I am completely aligned to what he's saying. But what I want to point out here is, this is exactly what innovation is about.
Yeah.
Like, is it in the design thinking framework also, I mentioned about the 4W thing, right? The
Hmm.
like, what is, yeah,
Wow.
what
What
if, and then what wows, and then what works, right? So then in that wows, he's quantifying that wow.
Yeah.
So his framework is fitting there. So like, how much of wow will mean that people will not go back to the earlier way of doing things. So that's a very good framework for people to follow. I would strongly recommend people to
I
follow
think
that.
what it does is it takes you beyond experimentation into a mode of adoption. So the change becomes kind of irreversible, and you sort of,
Yes, yes,
there's a stickiness to stay with it. It even becomes bragworthy, and you show it off and say, hey,
yes,
see what
yes,
I
yes.
got. So that wow
Yeah,
that you're talking about, right?
yeah. So it is irreversible. It is also bragworthy. And because it is bragworthy, therefore it spreads like wildfire,
Mm.
fire, right? So you don't have to spend too much money on new customer acquisition, right?
Right.
Because the users themselves are promoting your brand and your products, then you don't have to spend much on marketing. Yeah.
So tell me, you work a lot with startups and entrepreneurs who are agile and open to change. In fact, they're very experimentative. But have you ever worked with MSMEs? And if you haven't, what would be your advice to them?
Yeah, so I have tried to, honestly, because there are two sets of people that I work very well with. One
Mm.
is early stage companies, and the other is very large product companies. Service companies, no. I mean, they don't have that orientation at all, and that was a very surprising fact for me to
Oh,
realize. Uh, but so I focus only on product companies. Okay, they understand the value of whatever we are talking about. So, but then in between this whole MSME segment, they have tested some success. They have the money, they have the market, they have the people, but what they do not have is the mindset. I'm sorry to say this, but you won't believe me. They are educated, fancy educations, like
yeah.
fancy, real fancy education. Their second generation is even better. Okay,
Mm.
in terms of the exposure and stuff like that. However, they would come and tell you, "Oh, Abhijit, I was doing this for the last 10 years. We are just a 100 crore company." But then the same idea this 25-year-old kid is doing, he has raised already $200 million. Why it is happening? And I tell them on their face, because it's him. Because he does not have your brain. Brain in a sense, the mindset of
Sure.
complacency, right?
Mm.
And then one more thing, please do not get me wrong, I'm not saying anything against the MSMEs. All I'm
Yeah.
trying to say is that they have to work on their mindset. They have
Mm.
to let go. This is
Yeah.
the word, let go of the legacy. And then you embrace the new. You know that there would be, and you can afford, right? So let's say if you are a 100 crore company, if I say that their focus is how do I make it a 120 crore company or a 150 crore company, and there is the potential is to make it a $1 billion company. Now
Yeah.
it's a different, you can't
Different
you
ball
can't
game.
expect the same impact by doing this different two different kind of. You can't take a 100 crore company to a 1,000 crore company doing the same thing that will take it from
Yeah.
100 crore to 150 crore. You will
Mm.
get there 150, and it's a decent life. You're driving a fancy car, you live in a nice
Right.
house, you have a fancy holidays, your kids go to fancy schools, everything is hanky dory, and that is probably is giving you the complacency.
Yeah.
And you have a fear of losing whatever you
Mm.
have accrued, and therefore you do not experiment, you do not kind of open up to new ideas of doing the old things, and therefore some 25-year-old kid is going to beat you for sure.
Yeah. It's called emptying the cup. You have to let go of something to empty
Yeah,
the
yeah,
cup, get
yeah,
something new in.
yeah,
But yes, it
yeah.
is true that the younger ones are clearly taking the cake and
True,
walking away
but
with
not
it.
all. I mean, also we should also acknowledge that there's a lot of MSMEs, family-run businesses who are recognizing this trend. They are understanding this, and then they are changing their, mending their ways. I must
Yeah.
say, and
Yeah.
you will see them, in
Yeah.
the news very
A lot
soon.
of them
So
are actually using their financial muscle power to acquire the younger ones and use that to innovate. Actually, most of the larger organizations are doing that. The whole M&A
yeah,
game is about,
that's okay.
adapt
That's okay. If
faster.
for example, in a industry like healthcare, if that
Mm.
M&A is not there, that healthcare industry will not survive. So any innovation which happens in healthcare, let's say for example, it has to be acquired by a bigger company, because otherwise it will not efficiently market the
Yeah.
solution, so
Scale.
that yeah, for scale. So it's even necessary. I was actually talking to someone in Singapore who's running an incubator for healthcare startups the other day, and we were discussing exactly this. That he told me, Avijit, if this M&A market is not there, this the innovation in the healthcare market
Survive.
will dry up,
Yeah.
because this small startup can never scale up.
Yeah.
It's not their exit is sell off to
Yeah.
a bigger company. That's it. But it can be very
Absolutely.
different in other areas, like maybe a food startup or something like that. Yeah.
No, but even there, I mean, it's the smaller ones. All of them are based, a lot of them are looking for exits after 200, 400 crore and being acquired by some of the FMCG giants. And they make
Right.
their money. But the FMCG giants are the ones that are truly able to scale it, maybe, nationally, globally, and so on, because the muscle that is required for that kind of distribution, marketing, brand building is not something that every,
True.
startup can do. So, yeah. I mean, I think there is obviously a method to this whole thing. I think it's been an absolutely incredible conversation, but I am very conscious of time. And
Sure.
even though we're having fun, but I think we'll have to kind of near an end here. So, would you
Yes.
like to leave any parting thoughts before we
Okay.
finish?
Um, okay. So I run a design studio, right? So I feel innovation is design first. Uh, uh, and I want more designers to become entrepreneurs, and more entrepreneurs to see the value in design.
Mm.
Um, as a kid, I wanted to become a painter, but I became an engineer and an MBA and walked the traditional path. And then in my 40s, in my late 30s, I figured out that no, I mean, my route is somewhere else. So I have this very unique life. I enjoy to the fullest, because it kind of marries my left and right brain very well. So I'm happy, but I want more of designers to become entrepreneurs. That's my
Dream.
ask to the world. My yeah, and because there's a person called Fyodor Dostoevsky. He was a novelist, right? He wrote a very interesting novel called The Idiot. Okay, The Idiot. It's like in the late 1800s, like I think 1867 or so. Okay, and in that book, he had a fantastic phrase in his protagonist word, and I would like to end this conversation with that.
Mm.
Is that there are tons of problem in the world, right? And we need solutions. And I feel it is not technology or these and that politics or a socio-economic force and stuff like that. Those things are there, but what would save the world is beauty. And I would end this with the line that Dostoevsky had put into his protagonist's mouth, and it says, "Beauty will save the world." So
Wow.
I'll just pause there.
Okay.
Believe me, beauty will save the world. We need to probably be more aspirational in terms of beauty, and then think about the word beauty beyond the cosmetics of it. Okay.
Yes.
So that's it. I would say let us all try to kind of strive to make the world more beautiful. Uh, that's all
Lovely.
I would say.
On that note, Abhijit, amazing. Very inspiring conversation. I'm sure I've had fun. I'm sure our listeners are going to enjoy this a lot as well. I will only end with
So do I.
saying that, product design and innovation must be systemically adopted by large and small companies alike. And since I talk a lot about customer experience, I think this is absolutely cardinal to customer experience because
That's
consumers are constantly evolving lot and their needs are a constantly evolving, changing set. And for us to keep in tandem with that and continue to think ahead of the curve is absolutely important to, survive. I'm not even saying to grow, right? And so
true.
when this is well deployed, where innovation happens, when customers fall in love with products, I think it creates for the most amazing relationships between customers and brands. And those that kind of relationships kind of really create great organizations because that's where customers are loyal, there's repeat business, there's positive word of mouth, advocacy, all of the others follow. So I think amazing, interesting theme that leads into consumer experience today based on this design principle. So thank you so much once again, Abhijit, for this.
Thank you for having me here. Thank you.
Thanks. And before we end, for our listeners, thank you for joining us today on this episode of CX Excellence with your host, Anjali. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I did today. Remember, the success of your business depends a lot on product design and innovation, working in tandem with consumer experience. So please make them work cohesively. And until the next fortnight, keep mastering the art of CX. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Bye bye.